Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Man in My House Tried to Attack My Mom by KittyCat0930. When I was 4 and my brother was 3, something very disturbing and random happened. It was late and my mom had already put us to bed. She was having a glass of wine in the living room while watching TV. My dad was in the basement doing something on his computer. Suddenly, the front door opened, and our front door opened right into the living room. A man wordlessly walked into the house and scared my mom so much that she dropped her wine glass. My mom asked him what he wanted, and he said he was in the wrong house. But he advanced towards her, and he was much bigger than my mom, who was 5'5" and petite. My mom said he seemed like he was set on doing something. Then he cornered her so she couldn't run, and then pushed her on the couch. My mom said she was so scared she couldn't scream, and then he reached into his back pocket. She realized she had to do something, so she yelled out my dad's name as loud as she could. Usually, my dad would say, "Hold on," or something like that. But I think he heard the terror in her voice and came right upstairs and saw the man standing over my mom. He told the man to get the fuck out and said that he had a gun, and the guy just seemed totally shocked to see my dad there. The man ran out the front door, and I think that he'd been watching my mom through our front window and assumed she was alone. My dad called the police, but they never found the guy. And after that, the doors were locked as soon as my brother and I were put to bed. My dad also put a baseball bat in the closet next to the front door and bought one of those folding hunting knives and hid it in the closet on the top so my brother and I couldn't get it. I've always wondered if this was related to our crazy neighbors, because it was just so random. I Saw a Creature in the Woods That Didn't Want Me There by Foxy Dandy. This happened in Cleveland, Georgia, sometime around September of 2021. I don't remember the exact date because it was a while ago. I live on a big farm owned by my family, and we have woods for miles in just about every direction, with creeks and hills to accompany the woods. But back then, when I was a little younger, I loved going on walks in those woods. I would go on walks just about every morning, and I never cared much for worrying about what was out there. I always just strolled through the woods behind my house that seemed to go on forever. One day, I walked farther than I ever had before. I just wanted some more exercise, and I was restless that day. I felt like I had enough energy to keep going and just enjoy the beautiful view in the woods. After I was past a certain point, I came to a clearing with a big rotted log in the center of it. It was beautiful. It was clean like the forest floor had been vacuumed, almost like a carpet, and the sun shined through the treetops perfectly. I just wanted to sit down and enjoy that gorgeous view in front of me, so I decided to sit down on the rotted log to take it all in. Everything felt so warm and homey, but for some reason, sharp and sinister at the same time. Or maybe that's just how I'm choosing to remember it, so I never go back there. Anyway, there were birds and the sounds of wind, and then suddenly, all of the joy in that place went away. The sun was covered by clouds, and it was so weird. There were no more sounds at all. I can't even describe it. I've never felt anything like it. I just sat there with that feeling I couldn't shake, like there was no happiness in the world at all. And I was scared of something that I hadn't even seen. And then, far away up the hill, even deeper into the forest, I heard a branch snap. It felt like whatever it was acknowledged that I knew it was there, and that it knew I was where I wasn't supposed to be. like I had wandered into its territory. And then, after this cold, slow movement, I heard whatever it was fucking bolt down the hill violently like no animal or human could ever achieve. And then I saw it for the first time. It was just wrong. It didn't look like anything other than a monster, and even then it didn't look right. Its body was warped and uneven, its skin stretched over its body like it was on wrong. There was no visible mouth or eye holes, just depressions in the face where they should have been. It ran on all fours, but like in a zigzag, and fast. And it just walked wrong. I mean, sharp bones sticking out of random places. And that's when I stopped looking at it, and I ran faster than I'd ever run. But it was gaining on me. I mean, this thing ran at like 30 miles an hour, baby, and I was just a kid. I couldn't hear anything in the world other than the leaves behind me crunching and my own heartbeat. I got to a road that led to my house as a car drove by, and I saw this thing crawl back up the hill in its weird zigzag, unpredictable pattern. My eyes couldn't stop staring at the tree line as I stayed on the opposite side of the road from where it was, as I ran home until my legs were spasming and bruised. I don't know why it left me alone, but I'm still scared by it today. So scared that I've never gone on a walk alone since that day. And the worst part is, I don't even know what it was. I don't know if it was a skinwalker or a wendigo. I don't know. And I don't know if it could still be hunting me, and I've just gotten lucky so far. I promise you all, this is real. And after that experience with this creature, I've been completely invested into hearing these types of stories. And I understand the feeling that no one will believe you because of how batshit crazy it sounds. Could someone out there comment on what the hell this thing was? I just really want to know what I saw that day. Stranger on the Road by Ceaseless Watcher. This is my first time ever saying anything like this, but I'm honestly at a loss for words and would honestly just like others' thoughts on this occurrence. This happened just last week on October 2nd, 2024. I'm 22 and a manager of a Dollar General, and I just locked the doors at 10 p.m. and was beginning the usual closing tasks when I got a call from my little brother. He's 17 years old and recently had gotten into exploring abandoned buildings and climbing large structures like radio towers. I'll be honest, his new hobby does fill me with anxiety, but despite being a dumb teenager, he's still somewhat smart about his ventures, except for this time. When I answered the phone, he was asking for my help, and he told me he'd been out exploring an abandoned house that he'd come across, and he was just about to leave, but he said his car wouldn't start and that the battery was dead. He also told me that he was alone. Usually he'd go with a buddy, but he'd gotten this kind of fearlessness where he didn't bat an eye at solo adventures. He didn't want to call her mom either because she was under the impression that he was at a friend's house. Instead, he was a whole county away in the middle of nowhere, alone. I was pissed off about his carelessness, but decided to spare him a lecture until I was actually with him. I told him to send me his location, and I would be heading there soon. I got done closing around 10:30 and started speeding along the route the GPS took me. Usually I never speed, but the idea of my little brother out on some Alabama back road broken down all alone didn't sit right with me. It took me about 40 minutes to get there. I started off on a pretty busy highway and turned off onto a very remote highway and rode down that one for a long time. There was nothing but trees, fields, and the occasional tiny church. Eventually, I turned right down a very narrow dirt road that I nearly missed. I had to drive slowly. It was very unkempt and bumpy. The tree line on each side was so thick with darkness, and to be honest, the whole vibe of the place made me really uneasy. I just had a bad feeling. I took an extremely sharp turn around a bend and saw my brother's car about a couple of 100 feet ahead. Not even 3 seconds after my headlights had even shone onto his car, I saw him throw himself out of the car in complete hysterics. He was sprinting towards my car, screaming at the top of his lungs for me to unlock the door. I came to a halt, and he jumped in and locked the door, not even giving me time to process his distress. He started shouting at me to get us out of here and that there was someone else out there. I'm an act first, ask questions later type of person, so I immediately turned us around and floored it up the road. I'd never seen him in such a panicked state before. I mean, he was sobbing, having a full-blown panic attack. I sped down the road, and by the time we made it back to the main highway, he'd calmed down. I asked him what the fuck happened, or why hadn't he called me, but soon realized that he'd been too panicked to even think about calling me. He said about 20 or 25 minutes after he called me asking for help, he'd been sitting in his car listening to music and just staring off, when way down the road ahead of him, the figure of a man or a human appeared. He said he was worried at first that maybe it was a landowner coming to yell at him, but instead the figure just stood in the middle of the road, clearly looking at him. It was too dark to make out anything about the figure other than that it was clearly a person. He said whoever it was just stood there unmoving for a good 3 or 4 minutes before they very slowly shifted to the right and vanished into the trees and dark. At that point, pure panic had already set in for him because he was sure they were staring at his car, and because of the unusual behavior of the figure. He said whoever it was didn't pop out of the trees until another 5 minutes had passed, but by that time they had moved a good distance closer to him. He was fully freaking out now, thinking that the person had to be messing with him, or even worse, threatening him. He said he just froze. His body wasn't letting him do anything except stare out in terror. The figure continued to stand in the middle of the road, and then they once again shifted back into the tree line. He said the figure did it 2 more times, each time moving a couple of feet closer to his car. He said they'd been hiding in the trees again for about a minute once he saw my headlights, and the security of knowing that I was there is what gave him the courage to leap out of the car and make a break for it. I mean, the poor kid was so petrified he even left his phone back in the car. We went back the next day around noon to jump the car. My paranoid self even brought a weapon. The area was a lot less threatening in the daytime. The abandoned house could be seen through the trees to the left of the road, and to the right, a couple of 100 yards behind us, was a smaller road that led to a small radio tower. Given that it was bright out and my urge to know what had happened, I poked around with my brother. Other than the house, thick trees along the road and the tower, there was nothing but fields to either side of us. No sign of a barn or a farm or anything. I even looked around the ground floor of the house. My suspicion was maybe a squatter was out there that my brother missed in his venture and was just messing with him. But there was no sign of anyone actually living in the house. What unnerved me even more was the fact that around the back of the house, a good stretch of the ground was littered in bones. They looked like cow vertebrae. There were hundreds of cleanly cut vertebrae everywhere, but there weren't any cows in any of the fields nearby. I went back to the road and trekked ahead past his car, down to the stretch where he said the person had been standing. It was a dirt, dusty road, so I was looking for footprints, any evidence that something was there. But there was nothing. After that, we jumped the car, and I dug into him a little bit. I told him to never go exploring alone again, and then we left. But I'm honestly at a loss. He's not the type of kid to make up a story like this. And also, from his level of distress that I saw him in, I don't think anyone could fake that either. Haunted in the Desert by Kathy F. Back in 2006, I decided to move out of the Inland Empire. It proved to be a mistake due to numerous issues. But I found a decent home that was Spanish style, built in 1993 in the city of Adelanto in the high desert. Shortly after moving in, odd things began happening. My black and white cat Sylvia sometimes would sit near the hallway entry and stare down the hallway. It was as if she was seeing something or someone. Each time I would look to see what she was staring at, I wouldn't see anything. Many nights, Sylvia would claw at my bedroom door to get inside with me. It was to the extent of meowing and sweeping her paw beneath the door in a desperate plea. It was so weird. I'd always let her in, but I didn't understand why she was behaving that way. One day, my son Glenn asked me if I had left any meat out that could have spoiled, and I said no. He was searching through the kitchen for bad meat, as there was the smell in the air of rotten, raw meat. However, there was no source that could be found that could have contributed to that odor. That situation would come and go periodically. We would smell it for a few days, and then it would disappear and return a month or two later. Our dog would bark while staring at the rooftop on certain nights, and there was also the sound of shuffling of feet around the bedroom carpet sometimes. Other times, we would hear doorknobs moving, and things would move on their own, such as hairbrushes or toothpaste sliding from one side of the vanity to the other. But it would all culminate one night with my daughter Lisa. She was out jumping rope under the porch light, and then I heard her give off a blood-curdling scream. As I ran outside to her, she was running inside. She was completely out of breath and said that she had seen something on the roof. Something big and hairy, and hunched over, with some kind of glowing eyes staring at her. When I went out to check, I didn't see anything, but she was so sure that she had, and my daughter never lies. We continued to experience more strange things that we couldn't explain at the house. I always felt like someone was right behind me when I walked down the hallway, and my cat was obsessed with staring down that hallway. That never ended. We were only there for a year, but it was a year full of strange occurrences. As soon as I had the chance, I moved back to San Bernardino. Clown in the Park Wasn't Friendly by AdBig7225. Before I get into what happened, I want to say that I've never been great at writing descriptively, and I'm honestly still at a loss for words. But that being said, last night my friends and I went to the movies in hopes of watching The Joker 2. We hadn't bought the tickets online, and unfortunately we got there just after the doors closed. But because we were already there, we decided to see what else was playing within the hour and decided on Terrifier 3. None of us had heard of the Terrifier before, but it sounded interesting enough. However, soon after the movie started, I immediately felt my stomach drop. About 5 months ago, I was on a run at a park I had never been to before. My aunt had told me how it had a great trail, and because it was finally getting warm out, I decided to go even though it was out of the way from where I lived. To set the scene of this park, there was a big clearing where there were picnic benches, gazebos, and a playground. However, it was surrounded by a big forest, which was where the trail was. About 15 minutes into my run, my headphones' battery died, so I paused to put them away in my pouch. As I was opening my bag, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and looked into the trees to see a clown standing next to his car with a whole bunch of balloons. The scene immediately scared the absolute shit out of me, as I've always been a huge true crime junkie. I turned around and ran back into the clearing and eventually the parking lot. I cannot even begin to describe how psyched out I was. It literally felt like my heart was going to tear through my chest. But when I was sitting in my car, I did notice that there was a big group of young kids in the gazebo who were clearly having a birthday party, and I've never felt dumber or more relieved. It was obvious that the clown was meant for the party with his balloons. I laughed at myself even though I still felt on edge and drove back home. I had forgotten all about the incident up until last night, but when I saw the clown's costume in the movie, I immediately felt sick. The man I saw in the forest was wearing the exact same costume. I don't know for sure whether this character's costume is unique to the movie or not, but after trying to look up similar clown costumes, I'm fairly certain it is. I mean, everything was the same, even down to the stupid hat headband. I'm freaked the fuck out, and I don't know what, if any of it means anything. I mean, did I really come across some guy dressed up as a fictional clown killer? Why were they wearing it? And why in the empty part of an old park? A big part of me hopes that it was some sort of twisted prank. But if so, why didn't he go somewhere where he knew people would see him? And after watching that movie, I wouldn't be surprised if there were sick fucks out there who idolized him in a morbid way. Uncle Josh note here, yeah, that is kind of odd that he was nowhere near the party in the park, but again, I can't say for sure if he was a weirdo or what, or just some guy on his way to entertaining kids. But if you recall, a few years back, there was the killer clown kind of creep-out phase in the United States. People were dressing up as clowns and chasing passers-by and showing up on their porches and their Ring cameras and all that kind of stuff. A friend of mine, his name is Ben Radford. He is the deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine. If you ever want to hear me interview him, check out my other podcast, The Edge of the Unknown, which I am bringing back. And the reason that I bring Ben up is he wrote a book back in 2016 called Bad Clowns, and it's a really cool look at all the crazy sightings that people had, the history of clowns, and why these people were out doing all the crazy shit that they were to just normal citizens. Go check it out. It's kind of funny. There's some creepy stuff in it, but again, I'll shut up. Go check it out. Bad Clowns by Ben Radford. You can find it anywhere that you find your books, but I will put a link to it from Amazon down in the description. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Last call for creepy Halloween and fall stories before I start putting together the annual Halloween extravaganza. Email what you've got, as quickly as you can, to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. Really looking forward to this year's extravaganza. Hope you'll like it too. If you liked what you've heard, please give this video a thumbs up, consider becoming a subscriber, and make sure you hit the notification bell for every time that I upload. Leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you think of the stories. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I always do. Follow me on social media. Links to that are in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, find a link to my Patreon page and consider getting some Campfire Crew and Uncle Josh merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is down there as well in the description. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.